Hello and welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Memories. I am Wax the Brain Hussein and I'm joined by Fash the $1 Million Fan. Fash, this is an exciting week for all wrestling fans. This is WrestleMania week. How do you feel?
It is indeed, and as you say, it is the big week for all wrestling fans, isn't it? And it's came around quite quickly, but yeah, I think there's a big excitement for WrestleMania, and certainly this is a time when people go back in time and also, think about their favorite WrestleMania moments, watch some old matches. I think for me, the big thing is we're going to get some people in a venue to watch a wrestling event and any sort of event. So certainly I think it's exciting. And the 2-day format, which they initiated last year, is remaining this year. So yeah, it's going to be interesting and quite an interesting card as well.
It is. It's going to be a real bonus for fans because there's not 2 nights of wrestling. There's actually 4 nights this week with NXT Stand and Deliver spread out over 2 nights as well. And there's some excellent wrestling that's likely going to be happening over the next couple of nights. And then we go into the big WrestleMania weekend, which I'm looking forward to, even though the card might not be as stacked as some cards are. Which brings me on to our special episode, Fash. This is all about the WrestleMania Supercard.
Indeed. So you and I have been really looking forward to this episode when we discussed it. So today we are going to discuss our Supercard, our Ultimate WrestleMania card. And yeah, we both took turns to be guest bookers and put together what we feel is the ultimate of ultimate WrestleMania cards based on previous events. But yeah, we made it quite tough for ourselves in terms of the kind of strict rules we set.
We did. So let's have a look at them. And Fash, you are the architect of these rules, so you can
explain the Seth Rollins of this situation.
Indeed. So you can talk us through the different rules that you've come up with that we based our card on.
Yeah, so to make it hard on ourselves, rather than just having a full selection of anything we wanted and duplicating ideas, what we've decided to land on is this. We will have a WWE title match, obviously. That is the true WWF WWE title, not the world title, the unified one. It's the lineage of the original one. There has to be an intercontinental title match, which is the long-standing secondary title, a tag team title match, and a women's title match. So that's the easy part of what will be a 10-match card. But where we've made it really hard for ourselves is that no wrestler can appear more than once. So you're only allowed to pick one match of a given person, which actually makes it really difficult when you've got people like Mr. WrestleMania, Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, Stone Cold, The Rock, Hulk Hogan, Bret Hart, etc. So that was the challenging part, Wax. But the interesting thing is, you and I worked on this independently to see what we could come up with. And initially we had 7 matches, which we both had independently selected, which were the same, which left 3. And that led to some high-level negotiations between you and myself over the last few days.
Indeed, it did. I mean, I think that just goes to show that there are certain iconic moments of WrestleMania that everybody agrees on. So I reckon that of our Supercard, 5 or 6 at least will be included in everybody's card. But I think one thing to note, this is not the 10 best matches of all time at WrestleMania. Because of the rules, we're not able to select certain matches that would necessarily be in the sort of top 10 of all time, which is a shame. But again, it just goes to having something that, some criteria that we're working towards. And I reckon it'll be more fun for our audience to follow this criteria and try and bring up their own card under a similar fashion.
Yeah, under the same rules. And absolutely, as you say, I mean, I can speak to one match which won't be on this card, which I would probably rank as the best ever WrestleMania match and one of the best matches, full stop. But, it's the stringent rules. And what we are looking to do here is design the best event top to bottom based on matches, which would be obviously your opener, your mid-card, your semi-main events, and then a main event, which is a WWE title match. And I guess with that, we can kick off the opener.
Yep, so I think we both agreed on the opener. This was going to be an opening match that had come in one of the previous WrestleManias, and straight away, I think both of our thoughts went to the one match, which was Bret Hart versus Owen Hart at WrestleMania 10. Fash, what are your memories of this particular match?
I think there's several memories. I mean, just remember it being a really great technical wrestling match. I mean, the great thing about wrestling is when you've got a story backing something. So obviously you've got Owen Hart, the younger brother. He's jealous of Bret. He's turned heel on him at the Royal Rumble, and they're going to have a match. But, for Bret, it's one of 2 matches because he's going to fight for the WWF title later on. So for as a fan watching, you're like, okay, we'll beat Owen and then, maybe he'll win or not win at the end. So that was an interesting story coming in. But for me, it was just the kind of great chain technical wrestling between the two. The counter moves, just the kind of storytelling. Bret was the ultimate storyteller, but I think this was significant because Owen kept his end of it, and actually this was Owen's coming out party in terms of saying, I can be in the main event.
Yeah, I was just so amazed by the smoothness of everything.
Yeah.
You see matches a lot these days, and that every move, every sort of structure is being organized behind the scenes. But this match wasn't in that sense, but it was effortless. It was smooth, and both of them were superb.
Well, this was two guys that wrestled since kids, right? So they probably had this match over the years from when they were in the dungeon to this big event, and obviously Bret wanted to help Owen rise, and Owen had something to prove. In terms of the actual match, I mean, I don't know if you've got specific thoughts on it. I thought the ending sequence was really good. Owen tries the sharpshooter, Bret reverses, and then there's a bit of a back and forth, and then Bret tries the victory roll, and we've seen him do this at the King of the Ring when he won it in '93, but Owen actually catches him and gets a surprise pin, and there's this shock in the audience in Madison Square Garden, which really, puts an exclamation part on everything and kicks off the event in a huge way, because you're like, okay, who's going to top that?
Yep, and that's our Supercard kicked off in the best manner possible. Fash, did you have any alternatives? I've got one. I'm going to throw your way. We didn't select this. Daniel Bryan versus Triple H. I think we discussed this, but in essence, because of our other criteria, this didn't come into our card.
Yeah, I think, my other opener was that as well, looking across, and it's a great match, but then when you're creating it to Bret Owen, I think this certainly shades it. But yeah, if you could have two opening matches, you would have that one in there. But yeah, certainly for honorable mention, that was my other opening contest as well that could be considered.
Let's have a look at our card. Obviously, match one, we've got Bret Hart versus Owen Hart. Match two, Fash, we have the Intercontinental title match.
Indeed. So this is a hard one, right? Because, and the reason it's a hard one is most people, when they think of the Intercontinental title, it's the workers' title. And a few matches come to mind, right? And I think I'm going to start with the honorable mention here before we talk about this match. And that is, you think of the ladder match at WrestleMania 10 between Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon. And if we didn't have any constraints, that'd be on our 10-match Supercard. But because Shawn Michaels is so damn good, he's Mr. WrestleMania, we've had to keep him aside for something else. So we went for the original classic and the match that also inspired a generation, and that was from WrestleMania 3. It's Ricky the Dragon Steamboat challenging the Macho Man Randy Savage. What do you think about this match, Wax, in terms of, I know you've rewatched it recently, as did I. It still holds up, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's the one that everybody talks about as one of the original classics. 35 years almost, Fash, this match was, and it's not aged at all. I mean, it is perfect in the way that they've structured the match. And actually, for a match of its time, it was one of the very few that was structured start to finish, because Macho Man apparently was so so concerned or so worried, and he always had that mindset, that everything had to be perfect. He put this match together with Ricky, the Dragon Steamboat, in unison, and it came out perfectly. And I think also what helped the match was the setting and the surrounding. It was filmed slightly differently because the size of the stadium, the 93,000 Pontiac Stadium, it just meant that it looked like a movie almost, rather than just a match. And I think that added to it. And obviously the technical ability of both was unmatched at that time.
Well, that's the thing, is WrestleMania 3, which, changed wrestling forever. It really catapulted it into the mainstream. As you say, a huge crowd. And the main event was Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant, but Ricky Steamboat and Macho Man stole the show with just great technical wrestling. And I think this is one of the first matches where we have lots of false finishes.
Yeah.
So, nowadays you see everyone doing it, but for that time it was like, back and forth, and the crowd was gasping at each opportunity, thinking the match was over. So they played that masterfully. As you say, Macho Man had choreographed this to the T with Ricky Steamboat, who himself, it's a great worker. You had the added bonus of Elizabeth with the Macho Man and George the Animal Steel there with Ricky Steamboat.
Worlds apart.
In terms of Beauty and the Beast, right, if there ever was one. And then there was a backstory here as well that people forget. that Macho Man had injured Ricky Steamboat, damaged his throat. He was out of action. So this is his revenge and chance of the title. And, there's, as I say, there's a ref bump here as well. So, compared to what people have done now, and, Macho Man hits an elbow drop after the ref bump, but there's no referee. And then there's some back and forth. He tries to grab the bell, hit Ricky Steamboat with it again, just like he injured him. George Steele stops that from happening. And then, there's a roll-up small package from Ricky Steamboat, and he becomes a champion. And what a pop when that happens to really end what was a great match.
Yeah, I mean, both had very successful careers, but Ricky Steamboat was at the height of his powers in the WWF at that time. And I just love the pace of the match. They were just, it was constant. There wasn't a break. There wasn't one of these break holes where somebody's got a sleeper on for half an hour, but it was constant action, and that's what I loved about this match. And actually, that's something that you find in a lot of Ricky Steamboat matches. Just go see his matches against Ric Flair. They're just all action, regardless of how long they're actually fighting for.
I say, and that was the thing. After this match, I think people did recognize the Intercontinental title as the title for the guys who are the great technical wrestlers. Yeah. I think the biggest shame here, as you said, this is the height of Ricky Steamboat in the WWE. And I mean, the fact that then, he has this falling out with Vince McMahon and he's going to lose the title, everyone forgets what happened next. It's just this moment for him. And the Macho Man obviously goes on to greater things. But this match, as I said, inspired a generation and still holds up really well. So I think it's worthy of being on our card as the Intercontinental Championship match, because it was the original, I think, WrestleMania classic. Now we've got the first two matches out of the way, Wax. Let's look at the mid card, which you had to build something which would be quite unique, a mixture of things, looking across the WrestleManias, and it's tough, right? And we wanted a kind of unique gimmick match, and after some back and forth, we landed on Goldust versus Roddy Piper, the backlot brawl at WrestleMania 12. Give us your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a classic gimmick match, as good as you'll find anywhere. They start off obviously in the car park. There's a lot of heat, there's a lot of action, there's a car chase involved. They end up in the ring later on in the evening, and eventually Roddy Piper will win. I mean, these are two unique characters in the wrestling business. I mean, Roddy Piper's charisma is unmatched, I think, to anybody that has ever entered the ring. And in Goldust, you've got the weirdest, the strangest character that's ever been created in the WWF. And surprisingly, he had such a longevity in the WWF because his character was so unique, and it opened up so many chances for storylines. So, I mean, there's some great moments and actually some real injuries in this match as well, including, I think, a broken hand by Goldust, who punches Roddy Piper's head so hard by mistake that he breaks his own hand. Dustin Rhodes was sort of in the sort of peak of his powers as Goldust around about this time, I would say. I think it was just all action. It was fun, and that's really what's important about a gimmick match. It needs to be fun.
And that's the key thing being there. I said the way it was shot, it felt real. It felt like a fight, and then it goes throughout the night, as you say. I mean, the car chase, I think they took from the O.J. Simpson car chase. I think they actually took the footage of that as well in this. And originally it was supposed to be Razor Ramon against Goldust in a Miami street fight, but he had his falling out with WWE, gets suspended, is going to go into WCW, and they put Roddy Piper in the situation, and it worked really well because, as you say, Goldust was at its most extreme at this point in terms of really pushing the buttons, and with a Roddy Piper no-nonsense character, it really worked for him. So once again, another match which is driven by story, but great action and unique. If you watch it today as well, you'll see that it was something that was really different in terms of presenting a street fight. And, a good way to, after two Mac classics, having something like this would work really well.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a couple of alternatives, Fash, for this gimmick match. One actually involves Roddy Piper and Mr. T in that boxing match in WrestleMania 2, which you didn't like, but I thought was a fabulous entertainment spot. And the other one was another quite unique gimmick. It's a blindfold match between Jake Roberts and Rick Martel. And again, just because of the uniqueness and the quality of Jake's performance in that match, I thought I was very close to putting that in.
I mean, we've discussed that in our WrestleMania 7 episode when we're looking at the mid 91. For me, Wax, I'm going to disagree with both of those. I mean, uniqueness, yes, but a boring match. And as for Piper against Mr. T, I will ask the audience to go and watch that. That was a bit of a mess, I think. And of course, Piper hated Mr. T, so he probably hit him with a few real shots in there as well. But I thought Mr. T was blown up. But yeah, I mean, it was unique. If we're talking about uniqueness, I mean, other matches you could potentially think about would be the gimmick battle royal, which I really had lots of fun with WrestleMania 17 when they brought all the old timers back, and it was the shortest match ever because some of the guys just couldn't do much, and Iron Sheik only won it because they were scared nobody'd be able to throw him over the top rope, probably kill the guy. That's another one that comes to mind in terms of a kind of fun gimmick match. But I mean, there's been plenty at WrestleMania, hasn't it? But I think we've selected one that may be a forgotten classic.
Talking about forgotten matches, Fash, let's move on to match 4 on our card, which is the match between Shane McMahon and X-Pac at WrestleMania 15. This is one that you've chosen, Fash. So give us your thoughts.
Yeah, I wanted to, pick something that once again is a forgotten, entertaining match, and this is for a title which is forgotten as well, Wax, which is close to our hearts. It's the European title, now long defunct. But this match at WrestleMania 15, the reason I've selected it is this one match encapsulates everything about the Attitude Era in terms of good and bad. It's a match where there's various interference from the likes of Test, the Stooges, the Mean Street Posse, if you remember them. But in the end, there's a big turn in this match. So Shane McMahon is the champion coming into this. There's various interference going on. Triple H and Chyna turn up. And earlier in the night, the booking is such that you think Chyna has rejoined D-Generation X because she helps out Triple H in his match against Kane. So they turn up, but, swerve bro with Vince Russo writing the show. Triple H turns on X-Pac and the crowd is shocked. Shane McMahon wins and Triple H has joined the corporation. And this was the beginning of the game because later this year he'd become the world champion for the first time. I think it's a fun match. There's lots of back and forth. As I say, lots of outside interference, lots of, as action non-stop. Shane McMahon is obviously, in his early days here, but shows what a great worker he could be with the right opponent. And, X-Pac, I think Sean Waltman here is actually at the peak of his powers as well. So it's a match that people have generally forgotten at a WrestleMania, which was not the most well received outside of the main event. But I think, for somebody to check out a match from the 1999 period, which encapsulates, as I say, everything about that era, I think this match does that. And it gives us a chance to bring back the European title.
Yeah, and I'm glad we've actually selected this match for the reason that Shane McMahon is involved. We had discussed him in a couple of other matches, and it's just fitting considering he's got a match again this weekend at WrestleMania against Braun Strowman that he is involved. Also, let's be honest, this was the last match that we included in our card.
This was a tough one to boil down to.
Some discussion as to what we could possibly put in. An alternative I'm going to throw in, and I forgot about this actually until recently, was Randy Orton against Seth Rollins. It's a mid-card match, the type that you probably have around about this position in a card. It was a well put together match, but there were a few other options that we thought about. I think, as you say, that match that you picked out, we were discussing this. You hated the idea of Randy Orton against CM Punk at WrestleMania 27. I thought, a really solid mid-card match, and CM Punk went on to greater things. We talked about John Cena and Rusev at WrestleMania 31, once trying to get Cena on the card. But no, in the end, I think I did the pitch to you, and we landed on a more kind of overbooked match that's going to keep people entertaining. This is the kind of event, as you had said to me offline, that if there's a crowd there, they're going to die at the end of this because it's non-stop action. But that's what we're looking for here. Right, Wax, match 5 is our women's title match. And I guess, we've had some matches in the early years of WrestleMania, then the Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression. But the match that we agreed upon was the one that really kicked the women's revolution into gear. We're talking about WrestleMania 32 and a triple threat match. Yep, it's Charlotte Flair against Becky Lynch and Sasha Banks in a triple threat match. 3 of the 4 horsewomen of the current era of women's wrestling, and actually 3 of the 4 that have taken women's wrestling to a brand new level, unmatched to, I think, anything that we've seen before. And this match really was the coming out party for this generation of women. They even had a new women's world title introduced on this show by Lita, and I think that just went to show how important they were treating this division going forward. And actually, since then, if you look at it, all three of these women have had sort of key roles in the company, not just from a wrestling point of view, but actually the WWE are building on their legacy. And obviously, if you look at who's the most popular of the three, probably Becky Lynch currently, but even though she's away on maternity leave. But in success-wise, I mean, all three are superstars, in my opinion, not just women's superstars, but actually WWE superstars. The match itself is a classic. It's technically very proficient. There's some high spots, some dangerous spots, some suicide dives, things that you would see some of the more athletic men be doing. But actually, now the women are on a par with most men in terms of some of their moves. What are your thoughts on this particular match?
Yeah, no, I think this is obviously the reason that we get our WrestleMania women's main event just some years later. I thought, it was a great match. You see three of the best workers, full stop, in the company. Really good sequences. The ending was really good in terms of, the back and forth between them. I mean, there's a time in it when Charlotte does a double natural selection on both of them. Becky puts an armbar on Charlotte. Then you get the bank statement from Sasha Banks. There's the figure 8 on Sasha Banks at the same time that she's got the bank statement on. But ultimately, Ric Flair gets involved because he's the dirtiest player in the game. And in the end, I do remember, he distracts or stops Sasha from getting back in the ring. And this time, Charlotte does put the figure 8 on, and ultimately becomes the champion. And as you mentioned, for me, what I'd forgotten about this was the fact that this was now the new women's title, because up to that point it was the Divas Championship, and Charlotte had came in as a Divas champion. But as you said, Lita had announced that the winner of this would be the WWE Women's Champion, and that was, as you say, the exclamation point saying this is a serious division again, as opposed to what it had been for a number of years, which wasn't really about the in-ring work. So I think certainly a great match, and as you say, the three of them have gone on to even greater things since then.
Yeah, and I've got to say, I love the entrance for all three women, particularly Sasha Banks, who had her cousin Snoop Dogg coming out. And obviously, I love Charlotte Flair's music and theme music coming out with Ric Flair was another classic. And since then, Becky Lynch's entrance, every time you see her, the crowd is just on, on in heaven, basically, when they see her coming out. She gets great audience reaction. I mean, I think I would just point out to people, if you've not seen this match, you should go out of your way and see this, because I think this was the start of the current generation of WWE wrestling for women. The start of the match is terrific. It's so fast-paced, up there with anything that any of the men have put together. And again, this weekend, we've got 2 women's title matches with Asuka against Rhea Ripley. We've got Bianca Belair against Sasha Banks. And again, both of those matches are going to be classics, in my opinion. So go out of your way to watch this.
Yeah, but the thing was, we did, there was the other triple threat match as well that, I guess is an honorable mention here, which didn't make it. And that was the one that actually main evented WrestleMania. But I mean, what was one of the key reasons that, we didn't go for that one? I mean, this is the better match, but there was a key element of that other match.
There was a slightly dodgy finish in that match where the crowd were a bit confused as to how Becky Lynch had pinned Ronda Rousey. Had she actually? I think it was. I'm still not sure to this day whether it was a complete botch or whether they were trying to protect Ronda Rousey. It was the main event of WrestleMania 35, and it goes to show, obviously, the advancement and development of the women's division that they were able to main event that. But you're right, the only reason that this match comes ahead of that one is because of the finish. I'm going to point out 2 other matches that I think were worthy contenders. Trish Stratus and Mickie James. Obviously, in the Attitude Era, these were the 2 leading women wrestlers. And the other one I've got is Charlotte Flair against Asuka a few years ago for the world title.
Why is Sable getting no love from you?
Sable's getting a lot of love from me, just not on this card.
Nobody wants to. Let's not go any further. But Trish, I'll always give Trish thumbs up, and it's a shame that we couldn't choose more than one. But I think, if we look at what's best from an in-ring standpoint and just taking it to the next level, these 3 are worthy of this slot.
Okay, Fash, we're halfway through our WrestleMania Supercard. An absolute barn burner so far. Dave Meltzer's going to be really happy with this card.
Screw Dave Meltzer, right? We're happy with it, and I'm
sure
happy with it. Dave Meltzer would probably choose, a bunch of spot monkeys in every role, and he doesn't know what's going on.
Well, we'll take that up in a bonus episode one day. But our next match is one that we had to talk a little bit about. We weren't sure it was the right match.
Well, I was sure about it. You were just trying to challenge me for no reason. But in the end, as always, the $1 million fan came out on top.
Yeah, I wasn't sure that this was the right match for either of the competitors, but I think as a process of elimination, this actually ended up being the right one. And the match is Hulk Hogan versus Vince McMahon in a street fight at WrestleMania 19.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about WrestleMania, right, there's two men that really kick-started it, and it was Vince McMahon and Hulk Hogan. And, you're thinking, why this match? But the fact is, Hulk Hogan has to be on the WrestleMania Supercard, right? But, he's been involved in a lot of title matches, and his matches, unfortunately, will not make it into our final match, which is the ultimate match. So you start thinking, where can you place him? And for me, you had to have the two pioneers on this card, and what better way than to have them against one another? So this is not going to be your 5-star technical catch-can wrestling match, but it's really fun. It's a street fight between the two. Hulk Hogan's career's on the line. I mean, you probably laugh as soon as that's said. I don't know how many times Hogan's talked about retiring or potentially retired, and then he's always back for a paycheck, brother. But it's a really fun match. What makes it even better, going back to the original WrestleMania, is that we get a cameo from Roddy Piper as well. So the other man who's famous for putting it all together, it looks like he's going to attack Vince McMahon, but actually hits Hulk Hogan with a lead pipe. I mean, there's moments in this match such as Vince McMahon jumping off a ladder and leg dropping Hulk Hogan through the Spanish announce table. Those poor guys used to always get it tight. And there's obviously the moment, and then you see Vince also leg dropping Hogan. But that's going too far, Wax. And you know what happens next, right? When it looks like Hulk Hogan's down and out, there's going to be a Hulk up, brother.
Oh, of course. There's not a match that goes by without a Hulk up. And, he takes the victory in the end of this match. I mean,
three leg drops. But also,
that's what it takes.
Both guys are bloody as well, so they push the limits.
Well, that's what I wanted to mention. Match. They were gushing. It wasn't just blood; they were gushing, and they went all out to put on a great match. And I'm sure Vince must have been really pleased because when they first match up in the ring and they do that test of strength, he looks huge.
Vince even relative jacked up Vince.
Hulk Hogan. I mean, he's bigger than Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show, obviously, he's a maniac.
He's still a maniac. If you look at him, I'm sure people have seen his recent workouts. But he's just nuts. But you know what? In terms of the elements that are most interesting, just Vince's expressions in this match, the way his psychology, the way he sells things, his evilness when he's got the lead pipe, and just his overall work. I mean, Vince, whatever people say about him now and being out of touch, and we don't agree with a lot of the decisions he makes, but when it came to being Mr. McMahon, that heel character, no one was better, and it really became full circle. In a way, it's a shame this wasn't WrestleMania 20.
Yeah.
Because it would have worked extremely well. But, for me, another gimmick match, but one that's fun. And it had to have both of these guys there.
Yeah, I think... Sorry, I was going to say a couple of alternatives in a similar type of match, in a similar sort of street fight hardcore match. We had Shane versus Vince at WrestleMania 17. I thought that was a very, very good, entertaining match, similar along the lines to this one. We also had Edge versus Mick Foley that we couldn't get in.
That's the one I wanted in, yeah.
But that was our rules are rules match. Yeah. Exactly. And the other one that I was keen to get in, and it wasn't a street fight, but it was the first Money in the Bank match, which features 6 of the best that WWE had to offer. But again, we're going to talk about it shortly. 2 of the individuals in that match couldn't be in that because of our choice.
Certainly. I mean, there's one man that is part of the equation here that has one match that is just down as one of the best ever. So that means that we can't have these, because if we were just building, as we said before, a card of the best matches, then certainly that Mick Foley Edge match would be in there, and Money in the Bank one was a great match as well. But I think we're still shaping this up really well in terms of a overall structure and sticking to the rules. Right, match 7, it's for the Tag Team Championship. And really, Wax, I don't think anyone can debate this. There is only one match that is worthy of being the greatest ever tag team match at WrestleMania. And I'd say one of the greatest ever matches, full stop. It's TLC 2. It's Edge and Christian versus the current champions at the time, the Dudley Boyz and the Hardy Boyz. This was the third match between these teams on the big stage. So they faced each other in a triple threat match at the WrestleMania prior to this, so WrestleMania 2000, and then they had TLC 1 at SummerSlam 2000, and this is the third match now. So they've had 2 shots at it, and now it's going to be perfection in terms of this match. I mean, we could not do this justice in terms of how good it is.
No, I mean, the only way to do justice to this match is watch this several times over and over again. There's zero doubt about this being the best tag team match in all WrestleManias, if not the best tag team match ever put together. And I think that goes to show just what great chemistry these three teams had with each other. They could fight, one-on-one tag team against tag team, and it'd be a great match. But putting all three together, putting in the tables, the ladders, and the chairs together, it's just stupendous. I mean, there's death-defying spots throughout this match. The one that stands out, Fash, that we've talked about so many times, is Edge speeding Jeff Hardy off the top of the tallest ladder. There's a scary moment just before that because Jeff Hardy has his feet caught in one of the ladders, and I was terrified for him watching this again today, that something bad was going to happen. There's another one actually just as bad. Christian falls off a ladder from inside the ring to outside the ring. There's nothing in between. There's no tables. He literally falls from the top of the ladder onto the floor, and I thought that was terrifying as well. And then you got Jeff Hardy doing the tightrope on three ladders, which actually does go wrong. The third ladder ends up buckling and he falls. Bubba and Matt fall off a ladder onto four tables. It's just, I mean, it's spot filled. You got Lita, Spike Dudley, and Rhino coming in.
Well, that's the thing. The supporting characters people forget about. That actually those three were part of this and were actually pretty pivotal in the overall action.
Yeah, and tremendous spots from each of them, and really added to the match rather than take away, as it's quite often does. And again, it's just a tremendous match. And I watched all of our card today, and this is the one that I was physically, shouting at the TV, getting really happy, laughing, and just like.
That's because you're just crazy. You're not right in the head. You're not right in the head. That's probably didn't take your pills today. But
in terms of a match, it's just out of this world.
Well, this is the we'll talk about this another time, but to me, this is the greatest WrestleMania, right? 17, and as you say, the three teams together, amazing chemistry. Rhino helps at the end. He's the one that kind of eliminates a few guys from the action. Then he's kind of piggybacking Christian to the top of the ladder, and he takes the titles. So I think everyone was, great in this, the supporting cast as well. But yeah, I mean, we are going to encourage you to watch each of these matches in the order that we've set. But, if you don't have time, you definitely have to catch this at some point. But, interesting stat here in Wax, which I don't know if you remember or not, but there was 3 matches between these 3 teams, and Edge and Christian won every single one.
Yeah, and again, maybe it goes to show that they had potential as single superstars and maybe the others didn't. I was actually quite surprised that the Hardy Boys hadn't won one of these matches, considering they were the most death-defying of the lot.
I had to go back and just double check as well, because that's what I remember. And as you talk about the matches between them, I remember the Royal Rumble 2000 match between the Dudleys and the Hardys, which is amazing as well. But yeah, surprising that ENC won every single one, but that's something that they can definitely hang their hat on. But when it comes to kind of putting a end to this rivalry in terms of how everyone remembers it, this was the match. So yeah, I think no one can argue with that. And if you're going to argue with us, you can, what?
Yeah, I don't even have any alternatives, Fash. There's nothing that comes.
No, there's nothing here that. I mean, we can talk about other interesting tag team matches. I mean, one that comes to my mind is WrestleMania 14, and it's Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie against the New Age Outlaws. And then obviously the early WrestleManias, you've got some good technical tag team matches, but yeah, nothing comes close. There's nothing that could be an honorable mention really here when we're talking about TLC 2. Right, match 8. WrestleMania is about celebrities, right, Wax? And we wanted a specific celebrity match on the card, and this was a lot of debating between you and I, because there's been so many interesting ones. You've already mentioned Mr. T and his involvement at WrestleMania 2, and of course WrestleMania 1. The other honorable mentions were LT against Bam Bam Bigelow, a match that I particularly like from a very poor WrestleMania 11. And of course, Floyd Money Mayweather, another man who believes in the money, against the Big Show, which was, the biggest versus the best. But none of these matches made the cut. We landed on something which was more recent, and it's actually got a number of people involved in this one with one big celebrity.
Yep, Fash, it's WrestleMania 34. We've got Kurt Angle and Ronda Rousey versus Triple H and Stephanie McMahon. And the reason wasn't just the fact that Ronda Rousey at this point was, almost at the peak of her powers in terms of, love and adoration by the US public. She just come off UFC a couple of years beforehand, and she was the face of UFC for a couple of years before that. It's also the fact that we've got Kurt Angle and Triple H, two Hall of Famers involved in this match, and another McMahon, which just sort of completes.
We had to get all the McMahons on this card,
indeed. And actually, I think nobody expected this match to be as good as it was. It was Ronda Rousey's first match. It was Kurt Angle coming back into the ring after a long break, and he didn't look fantastic off screens. He put on quite a bit of weight, and he was injured. Triple H also hadn't been wrestling that much, and obviously Stephanie's not a wrestler. But what they did put together was a match that was tremendous. You could almost say this is a filler match, but it actually provided the audience a lot of fun. And it was played out a little bit like an 80s tag team match where you've got the heels constantly, getting up to some sort of shenanigan, making sure that they're staying away from the baby faces until the big payoff. And that's when Stephanie eventually is caught by Ronda Rousey, and the fans absolutely erupt at that moment. And there's very many spots within this match that are fun to see, especially the sort of double submission that occurred midway through the match, and then the ending with Stephanie and Ronda Rousey. A great effort, I think, by all, and I think a worthy celebrity match to have.
Yeah, I think Triple H and Stephanie deserve a lot of credit here. I say Stephanie really surprised. I mean, this match originally was signposted a couple of years earlier when The Rock had a face-off with Stephanie and Triple H, and he introduces Ronda Rousey into the ring, who's sitting at ringside. It's a shame we didn't get that one, because that certainly would have been a main event. But I say Kurt Angle, it was a shame in a way to me. Kurt wasn't the Kurt that we remember. Certainly, in TNA he had a really good run, but near the end he was breaking down. And he did have a match prior to this, didn't he, with the Shield? He teamed up with them, but he wasn't at his best. But he did bring it on this night, and I think Triple H helped a lot with that. I mean, the real reason you've got this match on the card, right, is because you wanted Triple H on the card, and he just wasn't featuring the way I was going about things. So we got him on, but jokes aside, he and Angle certainly deserve to be on this. But the alternative would have been the Ultimate Warrior absolutely squashing Triple H at WrestleMania 12, which I think is tremendous even to watch today.
Yeah, well, there you go. A Triple H hater, as always. But I just want to mention one of the alternatives that you obviously mentioned was Floyd Mayweather versus Big Show. And I watched this again today, and I was shocked by how intense the crowd was for this match. Yeah. And that made it. There wasn't a lot of action, but I mean, when Floyd was coming into the ring, he was getting so much heat. Obviously, the aim was to build him as a babyface, but Floyd is not a babyface. Yeah, right? Yeah. He's a natural born heel. And eventually, the crowd just loved every moment of Big Show beating the crap out of Floyd Mayweather. And actually, I was surprised at how much damage Floyd took, including a slap to the chest.
Well, this is, a good point by you, because I thought, at the time watching this, he's not going to do much. He's got huge boxing matches to come. But he does. He actually does way, way more than you'd ever expect.
Yeah, and he looks good doing it. And the fun stuff was obviously the reaction of his supporting team outside the ring. Every time he would get hurt, they were just, the reaction was tremendous, and they get involved throughout the match. And I think that was a worthy alternative to this match.
Yeah, certainly in my initial card had that. But then we obviously discussed and thought, okay, overall match quality, it's this one.
Okay, Fash, we're almost at the end of our supercard. The penultimate match involves two absolute legends. When you think of WrestleMania, these two names will appear as number 1 and number 2 on your list. Number 1 is The Undertaker. The streak is synonymous with WrestleMania. And number 2 is Mr. WrestleMania himself, Shawn Michaels. We could easily have a card of just Undertaker matches, just Shawn Michaels matches, or combine the two to make a great card. And in this match, everything comes together perfectly. These two had great chemistry whenever they worked together. And this match particularly was outstanding.
Yeah, we're talking about WrestleMania 25, the first match they had at WrestleMania. As you say, Shawn Michaels made this hard, and that's why the rules are so difficult, because there's so many great matches he's had, right? I mean, I'll just list some of them right now. We talked about the WrestleMania 10 match where they kind of revolutionized things with the ladder match, but, the match with Bret, the Iron Man match, Ric Flair, he takes on The Undertaker again, 26, Chris Jericho, Kurt Angle, you could put that match down as just the best one. So it was hard, but when it comes to, these two, this match is special, and it's an instant classic. give it the 5 stars. It's got everything in it. It's the light versus the darkness, how they positioned it. And, we get a bit of everything here. The pacing, the psychology. Shawn Michaels is at his absolute best. The Undertaker is brilliant in terms of not just, dishing out his offense, but the psychology. His reactions are always great. To show he's been in a great match. But this had everything, and I don't think words would do it justice. Near the end, Taker gets hit with a super kick, the sweet chin music, but he kicks out. Then there's a slugfest. Taker kicks, Shawn in the face. HBK goes for a moonsault at the end, and as he's caught in the tombstone, and that's it, 1, 2, 3, midair. And that's the end to an absolute classic. As I said, there's so many things within this match that are going on. There's one point where Undertaker does his famous leap from in the ring to the outside, but Shawn Michaels pushes the cameraman in the way, and lots of false finishes. It's just got everything. So to pick one Shawn Michaels match is difficult. To pick one Undertaker match is difficult. But this I think is their absolute best. They have a rematch in the next year, and I think this still shades it. And it's something that I think when people talk about WrestleMania, they talk about this match, Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker. And it does have the two guys, as you say, Mr. WrestleMania versus the man who, made WrestleMania his yard.
Yep. And what amazes me about both these wrestlers is, they're not necessarily from a technical background like Bret Hart, Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero. These are not technical wrestlers, I would say, even though Shawn can be. They're more... it's all about in-ring psychology and making a story out of a match. And I think in these two, you have the two best in terms of the lacer boots.
Well, I'm going to say something and jump in. You're saying story only, but Shawn, I know he's not your mat wrestling, but he's the high-flying technical wrestler, right? And I think many would argue that he's the greatest ever in-ring performer. And I've certainly leaned towards that. And post, Bret Hart getting injured and Ric Flair maybe tailing off, for me, it's all about Shawn Michaels, and certainly WrestleMania, his matches are incredible, especially kind of when he came back from his injury. But you're right. They're not the mat wrestlers. Undertaker is the brawler, but with amazing agility and able to do those high spots. And I think, when they had their initial matches in 1997 and then 98 at the Royal Rumble, they had their interactions at the Royal Rumble first here, leading into this match. And then it was the next year again, and then the rematch. It's just both guys at their absolute peak. And this match, as I said, just, highlights everything that's great about WrestleMania. And it is a pure wrestling match. So this is the match which, it's not a gimmick. It's not any outside interference. It's just two guys going at it with an amazing story. And at the end of the day, The Undertaker gets 17-0 at WrestleMania. He continues the streak. Shawn Michaels will be back for one last hurrah.
Yep. These are two legends, obviously, versus each other. There's a few other matches I just want to put out there just in terms of those legends matches. And I think the one that stands out, there's two that stand out, and I think I'll let you talk about one. But one is The Rock versus Hulk Hogan. And I thought that match was main event material, and it was much better than anybody had a right to expect. But we watched that again. I think that's a tremendous match.
Mate, that to me is my most favorite match in terms of atmosphere. I remember still watching that live in 2002, and the crowd, and once again, it's the Canadian crowd. It was incredible. Now, you turn the sound off that match, and the crowd's not there. It's not a great match. But it's the ultimate great match in terms of, top 5 matches in terms of the crowd and psychology and how Rock and Hogan work it. And once again, because one of these guys is going to be in another match, we couldn't have it. But if we could just pick, for me, it's, as you say, it's incredible. And there has not been probably a better atmosphere for a match than that one. It was incredible. It's a shame we couldn't get it on this card, but there's a reason behind that.
Yeah, a couple others I just want to, sorry, before we mentioned the one that we're going to, a couple others that are worth a mention. Shawn Michaels versus Kurt Angle, tremendous technical match. And then Shawn Michaels versus Ric Flair, again, another tremendous story with one of the best endings that you'll ever see. But we can talk.
We had a similar match, didn't we? Instead of, but obviously Shawn said to Rick, sorry, I love you. I just said, sorry, I hate you, and I super kicked you into next week. And that was the end of your career. That's how I remember it anyway.
I think that was your dream last night, Fash. But
my dream last night cannot be broadcasted. But we'll move on to it.
There's one match that we wanted to get on this card, Fash. We couldn't find space for it because of our rules, but it's probably the best match that's ever taken place at WrestleMania, and that is the match between Bret Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin.
WrestleMania 13 is my favorite match. It's the match which basically the most excellent booking ever. The double turn. It's the match in which at the end of it, as was planned, I was a huge Stone Cold fan. And, we're going to talk about that match in another episode because it deserves that for both of us. As you say, I think it could go down even as the greatest WWF match ever. And certainly it is the match that made Stone Cold Steve Austin incredible in every way, but we couldn't get it into the semi-main event slot. So similar to not being able to get Rock there, we weren't able to get Stone Cold there. I wonder why. Right, 9 matches down. We're at our main event. It's for the WWE Championship. Now, there's 36 main events to consider, and there's been world title matches, WWE title matches. But what are we looking for? Well, we're looking for 2 iconic wrestlers taking each other on. There's got to be high stakes. And I think, this match had to define a generation. And look, there's other matches that you think about over the years. Hogan Andre, it really catapulted wrestling into another sphere. We both love Ultimate Warrior against Hulk Hogan, another passing of the torch. There was Macho and Hogan, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, as we've mentioned. The Austin era began with Stone Cold beating Shawn Michaels. And there's been lots in recent years. But there's one match, Wax, I think, that trumps them all for just having every element that you'd want in a main event. And to this day, has a legacy. And for me, the greatest WrestleMania, the greatest main event, it's Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock at WrestleMania 17. Nothing tops this.
What an absolute cracker of a match. I mean, you're right. This defined a generation of wrestling. We had the Attitude Era. This is the pinnacle. This is the highest peak that was ever reached. And it's the two wrestlers that are, I think, the most popular that have ever been in all of wrestling. Everything surrounding this match was done to such great quality. The video package before the match, and leading up to the event, tremendous. The music from Limp Bizkit.
Well, My Way or the Highway, wasn't it? It was, that set the tone. I mean, everything about it. I mean, carry on, but that is still iconic to this day as well. It fit more into them two than the actual song on its own. Just as if it was designed for them.
Yeah, I mean, the build-up, the moment in history that we've talked about, being the pinnacle of the Attitude Era, everything combined just came together perfectly. And, in my book, not just were they the most popular, but I think all round, these are the 2 that I would put at the very top of the tree.
I wouldn't argue with that. Yeah, for me, it's Stone Cold and The Rock.
And the match itself is just tremendous. It's hard-hitting, it's blistering, the pace is brilliant. They both get blood, a lot of blood. They're bleeding pretty much all match. The fact there's no DQ for a reason, I think added to the match. There were some tremendous spots, each hitting themselves with the bell. I think the Spanish announcer gets hit on the head of the chair.
They always get hit, man. And they deserve it as well.
They deserve it. And I just think together these guys sold so well for each other. Their chemistry was second to none. And this is the second match of a trilogy at WrestleMania, but this is the best one. And I think both were at the peak of their wrestling ability as well. Even though, Stone Cold coming in with his knee injuries and stuff, I think they put on a show for the ages.
And it was a story. So we talk about, this is the trilogy match, the second match of the 3. But this rivalry started in 1997. So their careers kind of intertwined. First for the Intercontinental title. Then, The Rock turns and, it's the corporate champion, WrestleMania 15. Stone Cold gets injured. The Rock takes the mantle. And this is after Stone Cold's came back, right? And people always talk about the ending of this and Stone Cold's heel turn, which soured a lot of people. And I remember as a kid when I saw this, even though they were kind of signposted it and I was reading stuff at the time, knowing that a heel turn could be happening, I was absolutely gutted when I saw that Stone Cold had turned here, because I was more of a Stone Cold loyalist, if you remember at this point. Mm-hmm. And, when people would say, well, actually Rock surpassed his popularity, I didn't want to hear it. But at live events he was, and therefore, the heel turn was put into place, which people sometimes forget, why it happened. But as you say, these guys were at their peak. They worked so well together. They had a lot of respect. You could see that in the ring. They hit each other's finishers. Rock does the amazing oversell, as he always does, of the Stone Cold Stunner. But in the end, everything's going to become full circle because Vince McMahon is going to get involved in this one. And that's where the crowd starts getting a little bit
And they build up in the commentary, and I've got to say, Jim Ross was on fire this match. I think it's peak Jim Ross. Anytime actually Stone Cold has a good match, Jim Ross is on fire, and it makes the match even better. And I think without the heel turn, this wouldn't have been the same. It would still be absolutely amazing, but I think the heel turn added that extra element that was important for this match, the extra drama. Vince McMahon coming out, helping Stone Cold Steve Austin win the match against The Rock, and the heel turn that we thought we'd never see, the handshake that we thought we'd never see.
And it's
just a
tremendous, right? Because Austin hits The Rock with a low blow. Vince McMahon is called into the ring by The Rock. He hits him with a chair, but Rock kicks out. Then there's multiple chair shots. Going back. Austin absolutely brutalizes him with a chair and gets the 1, 2, 3. And where it didn't work was because we're in Texas. The crowd goes crazy still for the victory, even though they're shocked. As you say, Jim Ross and Paul Heyman are amazing on commentary here, and they were a very underrated combination. But they sold it amazingly well. As you say, JR's outrage as it all, talking about Stone Cold shaking hands with Satan himself. It just works well. And you were like, what happens next now? But really, as we say, it's the two greatest performers, and this was the full stop on the Attitude Era. As you say, it hit its absolute peak. And at this point, ECW is gone, WCW is being bought. It's the two men that helped do all that in a way, that are now facing each other for the ultimate prize. And, the story behind it, Stone Cold's desperation to take the title back. He then, takes that final step to join up with Vince McMahon. The Rock showing how resilient he is. Just absolute classic from every angle. And I don't think any other main event would touch it. This is a match I think anyone who was a fan in the 90s to now remembers and basically holds as high as possible. It is the ultimate main event for the ultimate WrestleMania card. Absolutely.
I mean, before we show you the full card again and just give our closing thoughts, I just want to mention a couple of matches that could potentially have been chosen. I don't think we would have went with any of these, but we've got Hulk Hogan versus Ultimate Warrior, WrestleMania 6. I think that was a personal favorite of mine because it was iconic for its time.
Already said that, Wax. You're just being like Gorilla Monsoon here.
Yes, but let me have my moment in the sun like Vince
did
you stop? At the end of this. The other one, actually my personal favorite wrestling match in a main event is actually Triple H versus Chris Benoit versus Shawn Michaels in that triple threat match. Not just for the match itself, but the ending and the emotional ending that we get with Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero. One that I know you're not going to agree with, but I thought just because it was so different, and had something special about it, was the Undertaker versus AJ Styles in that cinematic match that they had last year. If there was a special category,
if that's not for the,
but as a main event I was talking about. But if there was a separate category of matches for,
do you know that, you make a good point, because because we couldn't use Undertaker, had that. But then I was even thinking you were talking about the gimmick match, the Firefly Funhouse between John Cena and Bray Wyatt, because last year was so unique. And as you say, that Boneyard match was a great way for, if that was going to be the end for the Undertaker, great way of doing it.
One last one that's always talked about is Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels, the Iron Man match. So again, all worthy main events in their own right, but I think we have selected the best of the best, and that is the Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock. Let's very quickly just share the card so everybody can have a look at the final WrestleMania Supercard. I don't think you could find a better card. But prove us wrong.
We do say so ourselves.
Prove us wrong if you want. I mean, share your matches that would fit in amongst these criteria. Try not to cheat, and send us your cards. We'll post them next week if we can. But here it is, all 10 matches. I think all 10 in their own right, stand out to be excellent matches, Fash.
Yeah, and what we'd like you to do is, it's WrestleMania weekend coming. Watch these 10 matches in a row. So watch our super card, enjoy each of these, and then give us your feedback. What would you have changed? I'm sure there'll be people that will try and say, oh, I wouldn't have that there, I wouldn't have that, but you have to stick to our rules, and it's all about entertainment and putting together a card which has the right structure and fun, and certainly we've tried to capture different eras. But I guess our request to you is watch these to get you in the mood for the 2 nights of WrestleMania. And that brings our episode to a close. We were quite excited about this one. I think it's been a lot of fun. And, it really gears us up for WrestleMania as well.
Yeah, I can't wait. Everybody should tune in to NXT Stand and Deliver this tonight and tomorrow, and then obviously we have WrestleMania at the weekend. I can't wait. I'm fully in the zone. Fash, let's go.
Let's go indeed. As ever, he's Wax, I'm Fash. This is Wrestling with Memories, and I wish we could play the WrestleMania song from the early 90s right now, because that'd be a great way to end the show. See you all. Have a good one.